Hello viewers, these are key messages from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education on the coronavirus. Dear parents, keep children at home at all times. Avoid sending children to shops and markets. Do not engage children in petty trading on the streets and garages. Allow children to play within the confines of the home. Limit visitors into your homes. Adhere to COVID-19 health precautions and guidelines. Schools are closed, but learning continues. Dear teachers, you are encouraged to desist from all forms of group activities involving students. All school premises should remain closed and not to be used for any other purpose. Thank you.
Good day, viewers. I am Masana Jesise, who has come to continue with our English lessons. So today we are going to look at comprehension as a topic in English language. Now, when you look at comprehension, it's a key component when you come to English language. So we are going to start by looking at definition of comprehension. Now, comprehension comes from the base word comprehend, which means understanding. Comprehension, therefore, is the understanding of anything perceived by the senses. Comprehension in learning institutions is mainly tested through reading passages or listening to audio devices, listening comprehension. So it means for one's comprehension to be tested, it can be through a passage that's given to you to read and answer, or it can be an audio material or device where something is read for you to listen and then respond to it. Now, note, to enhance comprehension, the learner's vocabulary and reading skills should be fully developed. That's very key. So it means when you come to comprehension, for you to tackle comprehension questions very well, it has to do more of your vocabulary and your reading skills. If you have a very poor reading skill, you are not likely going to respond very well to comprehension questions. And if your vocabulary is also very weak, then you are likely going to be in trouble to answer comprehension questions as expected. So two things are here: your vocabulary, your reading skills. All the two, both two must be at a very high level, so that by the time you read a material or you listen to whatever, you'll be able to respond as expected. Now, let's look at types of questions asked on passages. That is, types of comprehension questions asked on passages in WAS. That's West African Senior Secondary Certificate Examination. Now, the first type of question that is asked is real or actual comprehension questions. Now, real or actual comprehension questions are based on the theme or subject matter of a given passage. Let's put it this way: every passage that you do or read, it is centered around one main idea. Therefore, you must be able to identify that central idea, that's the subject matter. Is it about tourism? Is it about agriculture? Is it about sports? Is it about education, health, or whatever? So you should be able to put two and two together as to what this passage is talking about. That's very key. From there, we also have forms of real or actual comprehension questions. What are the forms? Get it? Though we say we have forms of real and actual comprehension, what are these forms? One, real or actual comprehension question can appear in the following forms. The double-edged type. It can come in the form of who, what, how, why, etc. Examples: A, why was the writer arrested? Why? 2, how did the commissioner react? You get the point? Or when you look at these 2 examples, they belong to the double H type. You get the point? Then the second set is inference or implied type. This type of question requires the reader to make a deeper judgment and an implied deduction from a given passage as required by the passage. It means you should be able to put 2 and 2 together. It means inference. You read, you should be able to read between the lines. That is to know what is implied rather than what is actually said. Now, example, the attitude of the writer towards the ostrich. So we have double H type. Here we have who, what, how, why, etc. Now, examples, why was the writer arrested? B, how did the commissioner react? These are double H questions. Also, we have 2 inference. We call them implied type. It means you read between the lines to respond to the questions. This type of question requires the reader to make a deeper judgment and an implied deduction from a given passage as required by the passage. Examples. What was the attitude of the writer towards the ostrich? B, describe the mood of the writer. When you look at these 2, they are implied. The answers may not be specifically mentioned in the passage, but as you read through the given passage, you'll be able to make position as to whether the writer speak good or bad of ostrich, whether the writer admire the ostrich or otherwise. And you should also be able to establish the mood of the writer. That's to gauge or measure the mood of the writer. Was he happy? Was he upset? Was he sad? Whatever. Then you should be able to gauge or measure the mood of the writer. Also, we have quotation from the passage. This type of question requires the reader to quote a portion from the passage to support an answer. Example, we have quote a phrase from the passage to illustrate that the writer does not live far away from the teacher's house. When you look at this, it means you are asked to quote a phrase. Take note. Sometimes you may be asked to quote a sentence or a phrase. When you look at this particular example, it says quote a phrase. Now it means the phrase could be found in a sentence. So you need to look out where that phrase is, and you quote exactly from where it starts and where it ends. If you want to quote the entire sentence, you are likely going to quote a sentence, and that is going to be wrong. So once you are asked to quote a sentence, quote a sentence, phrase, phrase, and should be word for word. In this, you don't paraphrase, don't change or add anything. Quote as exactly as it is written in a given passage. Then from there, we also have word or phrase replacement or vocabulary type. This type of question requires a reader to replace a word or phrase with another word or phrase as it is used in a given passage. You get the point? So when you come to word replacement, you have an option. Replace it with a word or a phrase. One implication is this. If you are asked to replace a given word with another word or phrase, you have the choice to use 1, 2, or more. But what is clear is that any one of them, if you choose to give 2 or more words replacing a particular word, if one among them is wrong, then the answer is wrong. It's just like objective. A to D, if you say A is correct and D also is correct, obviously, well, once A is correct and D is wrong, the answer is wrong. So you need to be very careful. If you happen to replace a particular word with a phrase or words, and both words are correct or phrases are correct, you get the correct answer. But once one is correct, the other one is wrong, you are not going to get anything from that point. Let's look at examples here. It says, for each of the following words or phrases, find another word or phrase which means the same and which can replace it as it is used in the passage. Take note of one thing here. What is saying here is very clear. You may have a given word and you may know 2 or more words that can replace that are synonymous to that word. What the question said, the most suitable one, it must suitably replace it in the context in which it is used. And this is what we call contextual word application. So you have to look at the context in which a word is used, and then you replace it with a word or phrase that can suitably replace such words in that context. So a word or phrase could replace one word in a different context, in another it may not. So you need to take note of that. And when you look at these examples, it's a fend for, considered, engage, yearning, eventually. When you look at these examples, what you must take note of is that you need to replace them with words or phrases that will agree with them in terms of not only word class but tense. If it is noun, should be noun. Verb, verb, adjective, so. If it is number also, if it is singular word, that is singular noun or verb, you should also use a singular word to replace it. You see, if it is past, like considered, engage, they are both inflected with ed. Therefore, you cannot use present tense form of a verb to replace them. So it means that has to be considered. Now from there we move on to another area. That's identification and interpretation of figures of speech. Now, this type of question requires the reader to identify a given figure of speech and to state its meaning as it is used in a given passage. Now, this one is not that very difficult. We have many figures of speech, but basically we have 5 or 6 main ones. One, we may have a metaphor, and we said metaphor is to make comparison with two things without using like or as. But that is what we call simple metaphor, that's direct. But we have what we call implied metaphor. Usually, idioms will come in under that category. So anything that's idiomatic is figurative, and anything that's figurative is metaphorical. You may also be asked simile. Already you know any two things that are being compared with the use of like or as is also a simile. You may also be asked a rhetorical question, and that's always the easiest to identify, because what you do first, look at the end mark. If the punctuation mark there is a question mark, you know it is a rhetorical question. It could also be an irony, which is a twist. Irony is a statement which is opposite to what is meant. You get the point? So you should be able to do that. You may also be asked paradox. That may all come under this literal figures of speech. Paradox also is a figure of speech which appear to be absurd or contradictory or senseless, but when you look at it critically, you see sense or truth in it. We have many more to that. Now, let's look at examples on the identification and interpretation of figures of speech. Here we have example. For how long do we have to come late? Question mark. Now, I say what figure of speech is used in the above underlined expression and what does it mean? Now, let's look at identification of grammatical name or unit and their functions. Now, this type of question requires the reader to identify a given grammatical unit, that is phrase or clause, and state its function as it is used in a given passage. Now, basically we have different phrases and clauses, but when you look at from experience, usually we have noun, adjectival, and adverbial, phrase or clause. And you know that's very simple. Our subsequent lesson will deliberate on that. Noun phrases have many functions, but basically they are more subjects or objects. In other words, when you have a noun phrase or a noun clause, if it is underlined before a verb, it is subject of that verb. When you have a noun phrase or clause, if it is underlined after a main verb, it is object of that verb. If it is adjectival phrase or clause, it qualifies a noun or pronoun. Usually, when you have the adjectival phrase or clause, the word it qualifies, be it a noun or pronoun, is placed very close to it, then you can easily identify. You may also be asked adverbial clause, you see, which also modifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb. They have their indicators, they have their different functions, and then we'll deliberate on them in our subsequent lessons. So let's look at examples on the grammatical unit or term here. Example, as I watch from the distance, it says what is the grammatical name given to the expression as it is used in the passage, and what is its function. Now, also we have how to present comprehension answers. There are rules to every game. Now, if you want to answer comprehension questions, you need to know what to do and what not to do. Now, the manner in which you write your answers tell a lot. So therefore, let's look at how to react or respond to questions that are set under comprehension. One, we have real comprehension questions require answers in complete sentences. Now, questions. why was the writer arrested? Correct answer, the writer gave false information. Note, it is inappropriate to present an answer like this, not given false information or false information. That will be wrong, because when you look at this thing, it is not a complete sentence. Your answer must get a subject and a verb that will qualify it to be called a complete sentence. When you look at the correct one, it said the writer, which is the subject, gave, which is the verb, and other things come. So take note of that. Your answers must be incomplete sentences. Don't use phrases to answer. If you do, you are likely going to be punished, or you may not get any mark for it. Answers to double H questions that open with why should not begin with because. Use because as a conjunction in comprehension answers. Now, we have different teachers teaching people. It may not entirely be wrong to say because, but there is implication. Because is a subordinating conjunction. If you start your answer with because, wherever it ends, there must be a comma, and another clause must come to complete the meaning of the first one. In other words, a clause that begins with because is what we call a dependent or a subordinate clause. And dependent or subordinate clauses themselves do not carry complete meaning. So they are always supported by main clause that are attached later. So in order to avoid any form of punishment, just go to the point, make sure you avoid because. For instance, if you just say, let's look at the questions here. It says, why was the writer arrested? The writer was arrested because he gave false information. Note, it is inappropriate to present an answer like this because the writer gave false information. You know, to some of you, you may feel this is correct. Why was the man late? Because it was raining the whole day. Yes, to you it may be correct. But when you look at that, it is just a subordinate clause, and then it is not complete. So you take note of that. So just say, the writer was arrested because he gave false information. You have your full sentence, and you get your full score. Then we move on to question mannerism. Now, the tense form of the question, present or past, should reflect the same tense form in the answer. That's very important. Take note. I said it earlier that when underlined words are asked to be replaced, you must look at the form in which they are written. If they are present, you have to replace them with present. If they are past, you have to replace them with past. You take note of that. Now let's look at it. It says, note, if the verb form in the question is in the present tense form, the answer should be in the same present tense form. The same applies to the past tense form in the question. Example 1. How does the writer feel? Answer, the writer feels bad. When you look at the question, how does the writer feel? The verb does, which dictates the tense, is in the present. And therefore, the answer shouldn't be the writer felt, but the writer feels bad. Therefore, there's agreement between the does as part of the question and feels as part of the answer. From there, we move on to question 2. Why was the writer arrested? Here, the writer gave false information. You don't say the writer gives, because the auxiliary verb was is in the past. Why was the writer arrested? If it were why is, then it would have been the writer gives. But since it is why was, so you take note of that. Don't just say, okay, why is the same. No. So look at the verb and then determine whether it is present or past. Once you are able to establish that, then you'll be able to write the correct tense form, and which will attract full score for you. You take note of that. Then answers to quotation questions. Already we started looking at that. Answers to quotation questions. Answers to quotation questions should be put down exactly as presented in a given passage in inverted commas. Example, quote a phrase from the passage to illustrate that the writer does not live far away from the teacher's house. Answer, a stone's throw, in quotation. Now look at this. A stone's throw, we know, is a phrase. And this phrase, even in the real material, in the passage itself, it was not there on its own. It was part of a sentence. But now you have to lift it. You must establish where this phrase is. And now you copy word for word verbatim. Don't change anything. So you have to lift as it is written. Don't paraphrase. Don't say, okay, I have a strong vocabulary. Let me just show to the examiner or whosoever is going to mark that, well, I can play with language. No. The idea is once you are asked to quote, quote as exactly as it is written in the passage. No more, no less. Note, as the writer leaves just a stone throw from the teacher's house, when the statement doesn't appear in this form in the passage. So you take note of that. Now we move on to word or phrase replacement. We call it vocabulary type. In this section of a comprehension passage, the learner has to apply the connotative meanings of the underlined words and not their denotative meanings. Contextual meaning refers to the meaning the word has according to how it is used in a given sentence. Words may belong to the same part of speech or word class, yet have different meanings to the context in which they are used. I already talked about this. When you come to word or phrase replacement, you must look at the context in which a word is used. Anything outside that is irrelevant. You have to look at this given word. It is used in this context. What does it stand for? Now think of a word or words, phrase or phrases that you feel can replace such a word in that context and make sense. Whether they have connection in the dictionary or otherwise, that's not important here. What is important is the context in which that underlying word is used, and your answer whether the two can exchange position and still convey what is expected. Then we move on to steps to consider when replacing words or phrases in comprehension passages. What are some of the steps? As I said, if you say, okay, now let me answer this passage. Words are underlined. What are some of the steps that you are expected to follow? So you take note of them. A, word class. This reflects the part of speech the underlined word is said to be as it is used in that particular sentence. The replacement should go like this: noun for a noun, verb for a verb, adjective for an adjective, adverb for an adverb, etc. So word class is key in this. You should be able to establish the word class of that underlined word. Is it a noun? Yes. Now think of another noun that can suitably replace it. If it is a verb, think of another verb that can suitably replace it. But other than that, you have a problem. If you have a noun and use an adjective to replace it, you have an adjective, you use an adverb to replace it, then you are not likely going to score much, or you may not even be rewarded at all. So be very careful. One thing is that factor in the word class or the part of speech. That's key in this. Now, steps to consider when replacing words or phrases in comprehension passages. Now, the first step you consider is the word class. You see, this reflects the part of speech the underlined word is said to be as it is used in that particular sentence. The replacements go like this: noun for a noun, verb for a verb, adjective for an adjective, adverb for an adverb, etc. So what you must not do is this: if the underlined word is a noun, you may not use an adjective to replace it. If the underlined word is a verb, you should use a noun to replace it. So what you must factor in is which word class does this particular word belong. Once you are able to establish it, then you will not find it difficult to look for a correct answer or word or phrase that could replace it. So you take note. So one thing that you must factor in as a step to consider anytime you want to attempt underline words in a passage is the word class or part of speech of that particular word or words. Once you establish them, you should be able to look for their right or corresponding answers, and then you get everything correct. From there, another step that you need to follow is number in nouns. You see, if the word underlined is a noun, its number, whether singular or plural, should reflect in its substituted word or phrase. This means a singular noun or singular underlined word, which is a noun, should be replaced with a singular underlined noun and vice versa. Also, if the article an precedes a noun, its replacement should match with the underline as it is used in that sentence. What is saying here is very simple. You have to factor in number. This number is not only limited to noun, even verbs. Because when you come to number inflection, it's not unique to nouns. Nouns do take number. We know very well when nouns take S or ES, they become plural, unlike verbs. When verbs take S or ES, they become singular. So therefore, in short, if a noun has S, it means it's plural. You must look for another noun that has the same and replace it. When a verb is without S, mean it is plural, you must not use a word with S to replace that. So you have to look at number. This number could be a verb, could be an adjective. So it could be a noun. Verb or noun. Is a noun singular? Yes, with S, singular. So if the noun has S, plural. If it is without S, singular. If the verb has S, singular. If it is without S, plural. So the two are opposite. So you take note of that. So use singular words to replace singular underlined words, or plural to replace plural underlined words. Then C, if the underlined word is a verb, its underlined word must also be a verb in the same tense form as the word underlined. Get the point? That's also important. Tense form. Because when you come to tense form, verbs may take D or ED to indicate past action. So once you want to replace a particular underlined word, you must factor in the tense form. Is this underlined word present? Yes or no? Once we establish that, you must now replace it with another word that also bear the same tense form. But you cannot look at an underlined word which is past with D or ED and replace it with one without D or ED if it is a regular verb. So you take note of that. So they need to agree in terms of number as well as tense form. Let's look at example here. Mariama was queried because she failed to discharge her duty properly. In this context, the word discharge is used as a verb and would mean carry out, deliver, perform, execute, etc. 2. They will likely discharge Lamin from the military for his misbehavior. Discharge here in this example is used as a verb and could mean release, sack, dismiss, fire, etc. So all these things need to be factored in. 3. Ami's behavior could be an obstacle to the work. The following words, barrier, blockage, hindrance, and inhibition, have similar meaning to the word obstacle. However, it is only inhibition that can suitably replace the word obstacle in this context because of the article an. So you take note of that. So it means now articles are also very relevant. When an underlined word has an article before, you must also consider that. Don't say it's not important, it's very, very important. So you have to consider all those things so that by the time you are done with your answers, then nobody will have a way to penalize you by deducting 1 mark or the other. Let's look at answers to questions on the identification and interpretation of a figure of speech. The answer to a question on the identification and interpretation of a figure of speech require an in-depth study of the literary devices. Note that learners should not define a given figure of speech in a passage for its meaning. Don't just look at the meaning and then that's it. No. Let's look at an example here. If it says, the light stood up to the onslaught, the question reads, what figure of speech is contained in the above underlined expression? Answer, it is a metaphor. Question, what does it mean? The answer, it means the lights were not destroyed. When you look at this, the light stood up to the onslaught. It is figurative. And I did say that when you have idioms, we call them implied metaphor. All idioms are figurative, and all figurative expressions are metaphorical. So therefore, the light stood up to the onslaught, it has an undertone or a deeper meaning or connotative meaning, and that's what you factor in to answer a particular figure of speech. In this context, metaphor becomes correct because the expression there has connotative or undertone or deeper meaning. Then we move on to grammatical names and functions. Now, answers to questions on the identification of names and functions of underlined expressions require that a learner has an in-depth knowledge on the functions of the various parts of speech in sentences. A learner is required to know what phrases and clauses are. Before we even read that phrase, you've been following my lessons, and we talked about word classes, we talked about nouns, pronouns, adjective, conjunctions, verbs, adjective, etc. And we did say that if we come to noun, adjectival, adverbial, whatever an adjective do, Whatever adjectives do, adjective phrases will also do, as well as adjectival clauses. Whatever a noun does, a noun phrase or a noun clause will also do the same function. So once you master the roles of noun as words, then you wouldn't be in trouble to identify noun phrases and noun clauses from the rest. Because if you know that a noun plays the role of a subject or object or complement, then whatever phrase is used, you have to look at the role of that particular phrase. Once you know this phrase is acting as a subject or object of a particular verb, then you know it is noun. If it is adjectival, we know adjectives qualify. All what adjectives do is to give us additional information about a noun or pronoun. So therefore, when you have an underlined word, be it a phrase or clause, you must establish the role of that phrase or clause. If that phrase or clause gives us more information about a particular noun or pronoun, you know that one is adjectival phrase or clause. When you have a phrase or clause, if it tells or gives us more information about a verb, an adverb, or an adjective, you know it is adverbial, because the only word which modifies a verb, an adjective, or other adverb is adverb. So simple. So once you master word classes, then you are sure to tackle all other topics without much difficulty. Now let's look at example on the grammatical names and functions. We have, as I watched from the distance, I observed that the man was sleeping. Now when you look at here, the online was as I watched from the distance. Now those of you who followed my lessons, we know when you look at this, you analyze. We did say that we have head words or indicators for noun phrases, noun clauses, adjectival phrases and clauses, as well as adverbial phrases and clauses. Now when you look at this, you look at the word as being the indicator or head word there, you know this is adverb. And will this be a phrase or clause? We wouldn't know. What we have to do is this: we must establish whether there is a verb that will change its form if the subject changes or the tense form of the verb. And when you look at it here, watch is in the past. Now if we change the time from past to now, the watch becomes watch without the ed inflection. So the past tense morpheme ed will disappear. So it means the word watch can change to watch or watches. So it is a finite verb, and as such, this answer will get to know whether it is a phrase or clause. Let's look at it. It says, what grammatical name is given to the expression as above as it is used in the passage? It is an adverbial clause. And what is its function? We say it modifies the verb observed. Now let's look at the structure in here. You can just say adverbial clause modifies the verb observed. That may not be very correct. Please write it in sentence. It is an adverbial clause. The it becomes the subject, the is becomes the verb, and then the clause, the name of the particular clause or phrase comes. And when you look at the function, you say it modifies the verb observed. You cannot say it modify. Take note. That may appear to be in agreement, but it's not, because it is singular subject and then modify is plural. So you have to say it modifies. So the modifies as a verb will agree with the singular subject, which is it. So you don't say it modify, but it modifies the verb observed. So basically that's it for our today's lesson. This is what I have as far as comprehension passages are concerned. And then already you know very well, we've talked about the different questions that are set and the different approaches or steps that you can employ to tackle all the questions that may be set for you in your comprehension passages, and that you need to factor in many things. Factor in word class or part of speech is key, and not only that, you also need to factor in the number. You see, is it singular or plural? So if you are replacing such, you need to factor those things in, and then also you need to look at the tense form. The underlined words, are they present or past? You need to factor that in. Also, don't answer your questions by using phrases. You see, so it means all your answers are expected to be in full sentences. So with that, you wouldn't be in difficulty. And one most important thing is this: anytime you are given a comprehension passage, your understanding of that passage matters so much. Don't just rush. Oftentimes you see people will immediately put pen to paper by just reading the passage without even actually understanding what the passage entails. So what you do best, read the passage, get general idea about the passage, what is this passage talking about? After which, take your time and then see the key points. I call them bonds. All of them have bonds, Bones are points that you need to add flesh to embellish your language. So therefore, you need to look for bones, not the flesh. If it is letter, we expect you to get your bones and then add more flesh. But when you come to comprehension or summary, all that you out to they give you full body. Now look at the body and then take out all the flesh, throw them away, get the bones and give them in their full structures, not in bits. If you do, then you get everything correct. So on that note, I thank you all for your kind attention, and then just a word of wisdom to students that just as usual, we all know what we are in right now. So anytime you are going out, wash your hands. If you come back, wash your hand, use hand sanitizers. Also avoid large crowds, stay at home and follow our lessons. So I think this will cater for the lost time that you are experiencing from your schools. So on that note, I thank you all. Until I come your way next lesson, have a nice day.
Hello viewers, these are key messages from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education on the coronavirus. Dear parents, keep children at home at all times. Avoid sending children to shops and markets. Do not engage children in petty trading on the streets and garages. Allow children to play within the confines of the home. Limit visitors into your homes. Adhere to COVID-19 health precautions and guidelines. Schools are closed, but learning continues. Dear teachers, you are encouraged to desist from all forms of group activities involving students. All school premises should remain closed and not to be used for any other purpose. Thank you.